Do you have really big, out of the blue responses that don't seem to fit the context of the situation you're in? When you look back on what happened, you realize that you weren't quite connected to yourself. Whether you're able to easily identify the cause when this happens, or you can't, I'm going to tell you how to make these reactions stop. Start with healing one trigger at a time. You can do this. Hi, I'm Tamara Ridge, a licensed marriage and family therapist. I grew up in a home where I suffered neglect, physical and emotional abuse. And that led to decades of similar abuse in my adult relationships, with the addition of spiritual abuse and sexual coercion. I tell you that because I've healed dozens and dozens and dozens of this kind of flashback in my own life, and I can teach you how to do it too. First, there's a few things that you need to know about them. One is they always make sense. Now, I know that seems counterintuitive, but they do make sense when you look at them in the context of your body history. So when they happen, you have to listen to what's happening in your body and ask yourself the question, how does this make sense? Chances are your body will show you something that's familiar, but really, really old. I have an example where this happened to me. I told you I've healed dozens of these, probably hundreds of them in my own life. I had moved to a new area. Until I established my private practice again, I actually went and worked in a corporate nonprofit. I started having trouble with a boss who asked intrusive questions and a colleague who did the same thing. So the colleague was a bully and my boss was my boss. But every time I sat with my boss, she asked me really intrusive personal questions. And I started noticing that when she came in on my staff meetings, as soon as she came in the room, I started feeling like I was in trouble, like I'd done something wrong. Now, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I knew that. But my body was telling me that something was wrong and that I was in danger. I knew this was a trauma response because I had fear. The other reason I knew it was a trauma response is because I reacted in fear whenever I was confronted, both by this colleague who bullied me as well as by my boss. Whenever they started asking me intrusive questions, I just gave it all up. Bunch of word vomit, any and all information, plus extra that they asked for. That's how I knew this was a complex PTSD response, especially because I didn't want to be giving them all that information. The second thing to know about emotional flashbacks is that they always have a consistent pattern. You simply have to pay attention and find the consistent pattern and similarities in the situations that cause those flashback responses in you. So this similar pattern for me was happening all across my life. It happened with this coworker who was a bully. It happened with my boss who was asking the questions. It happened in my family of origin because my mother asked intrusive questions. I wasn't allowed to have my own feelings. And if I had feelings that I hadn't communicated that she didn't agree with, she would ask me for them because I have one of those faces that you can read from a mile away. And then I would get punishment for what I felt. So now, anytime she asked me for information, I gave up all of it, usually over-explaining myself in a way that made me so much more vulnerable because now I've shared all of my thoughts and feelings. When you recognize a pattern like this, I was doing it with friends, I did it at work, I did it with people who I supervised, I did it with my supervisor. I didn't realize it was so prolific in my life until I did the work to heal it. And that's the thing that's good about knowing that there's always a consistent pattern. It means that healing this one flashback will lead to healing of the same triggered responses in other situations that are similar to. What you have to do is watch for them. Once you're aware, you've got to watch for them. And then you can prepare yourself for the next time that same flashback shows up for you. And you'll be ready this time to neutralize it. The third thing to know is that when you really get into investigating and working toward healing the responses to these triggering events, the flashbacks respond in sort of aha clusters. So when you know how to identify the seed in your body history, then you can separate that out from what's different now versus what happened in the past. And you can prepare your brain to see it differently, so you respond in the moment differently. So in the example that I gave you about my boss and the coworker who was a bully, once I did that work of noticing the difference between what was happening before and what's happening in the moment at work, I started really looking at it, and I decided that I needed to set some boundaries. So with my boss, I just said, I don't want to talk about my personal life at work. Now, you may expect that I was afraid to set that boundary, and it's true, I was. However, when I said that to her, she just said, okay, and never asked me intrusive questions again. With the bully, sometimes it's harder with bullies, I stopped interacting with him and then took the steps I needed to at work to protect myself. But here's the key. Afterwards, it was so easy in interactions with other people to see where I would have responded to questions with all of that word vomit, but I didn't have a compulsion to do it anymore. So that's the thing I want you to understand about emotional flashbacks. They always come in patterns. You can watch for them and prepare, and they always make sense. And when you prepare yourself, you can actually eliminate them across a variety of different situations that are similar. So I want you to know that what I've given you in this video is just the tip of the iceberg. Healing like this requires many other parts, like managing stress and learning how to trust your body. And I've got a link to my free course to do the Trusting Your Body course below in the description of this video. You also have to know how to use the information that you observe in a really specific way that leads to healing instead of being re-traumatized when it shows up. You also need personal support. And if you're interested in learning all about how to get all of those other pieces, there's a link below to the Trauma Erase Method Academy. I would encourage you to take a look. So let me know what resonated for you most in this video in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.